She said two words, and only two words, in the courtroom today. It was her first appearance as a prosecutor in an arraignment in her career as a prosecutor, and career is a very strong word to use for someone who has so far spent exactly 12 work days of her life in that career. If you're a kindergarten student in America tonight, first of all, you should be asleep at this hour. And second of all, you already have a longer career as a kindergarten student than Donald Trump's new favorite prosecutor has as a prosecutor. She proved once again today that she knows absolutely nothing about prosecuting anything. The only two words she spoke today were her name, and she got that wrong, as only she could. In a lifetime of listening to lawyers identify themselves in court, as they are required to do at the beginning of a proceeding, I have never heard a lawyer get that part wrong until today. She was surrounded by lawyers who knew how to do it and got it right, including one who showed her how to do it right before she got it wrong. The clerk was the first to speak in the courtroom today, asking the lawyers to, quote, "Please note their appearances for the record." And the proper response to that is the lawyer's name and who the lawyer is representing. Everyone knows that, except Donald Trump's favorite new prosecutor. The clerk said, "Will the parties please note their appearances for the record?" Mr. Lemons, good morning, Your Honor. Tyler Lemons for the United States government. Ms. Halligan. Lindsay Halligan. Mr. Diaz, good morning, Your Honor. Gabriel Diaz for the United States. The court, good morning. Mr. Fitzgerald, good morning, Your Honor. Pat Fitzgerald, and it's the honor of my life to represent Mr. Comey in this matter. The court, good morning. Ms. Carmichael, good morning, Your Honor. Jessica Carmichael for Mr. Comey. Now, I know if you haven't spent much time in courtrooms, it sounds very picky of me to note that 36-year-old Lindsay Halligan, who has never prosecuted anything in her thin experience as a lawyer, didn't say Lindsay Halligan for the United States. That's what every federal prosecutor says every time, something like that. And there's a very powerful ring to it in that room. It's a phrasing that scares defendants, although nothing could scare the tallest man in the room today, the 6'8" defendant, former FBI Director James Comey. But for a typical defendant who shows up in court for the first time in a federal case and hears the case announced as the United States of America versus John Doe, many a John Doe gets weak in the knees, realizing that he's up against, legally anyway, the United States of America. Federal prosecutors love to throw that around. Tyler Lemons for the United States government. Gabriel Diaz for the United States. Lindsay Halligan didn't know she was supposed to say that. Lindsay Halligan didn't know that she technically failed to respond to the directive to explain her appearance in court, what she was doing there. But what she said was more accurate than trying to claim that she was there for the United States. She was there for Donald Trump and only for Donald Trump. She personifies Donald Trump in that courtroom. But Donald Trump actually has more experience in criminal courtrooms than Lindsay Halligan has. Donald Trump really is the prosecutor of this case, and he is the most incompetent prosecutor in history. And so he has chosen the most incompetent so-called acting U.S. attorney in history. The silent Lindsay Halligan's prosecutorial career is now 12 days old at this point, but might not last much more than that, maybe not more than another month or so, because knocking her out of the case is one of the first things that James Comey's lawyer intends to do, as he announced to the judge today in discussing the scheduling of the case in which James Comey has asked for a speedy trial. Defense attorney Patrick Fitzgerald told the judge, We would like to bring a motion to challenge the lawfulness of the appointment of Ms. Halligan as United States Attorney because we think that's an unlawful.
Nice to be here.
Let's start with the little bit of new. We did hear for the first time from a judge assessing what is a very thin slice of this because we're not at trial. What did you make of the judge's reception today?
Well, what he was responding to was the first of what I believe will be many efforts by the government to slow the case down. They were clearly not doing what normally a prosecutor does, which is like, we're ready for trial, let's go, let's set a date. Remember, this is the so-called rocket docket. Yep. And so the government said, Judge, you should delay the trial because it's complex. Under something called the speedy trial rules, if you could declare something complex, the government's given more time. A false statement case, which is 2 counts, is very unlikely to be a complex case, and that's what the judge is reacting to. But the news here, the sort of the import of it, is the government is going to be, and I think this is going to be the first of many efforts by them to slow the case down. Yeah. If they don't have a winning hand, any day that the case is not dismissed or they do not lose the case at trial is a good day for the government. This is an unusual position for the government to be in. And I thought they looked very weak today in a false statement case, showing up and saying, Judge, please delay the case because it's
appointment. Patrick Fitzgerald didn't elaborate on the point at this stage. He was simply alerting the judge to the kinds of motions he intends to file before the trial, while suggesting an expedited hearing schedule for those motions so that there still could be a speedy trial. Judge Michael Nachmanoff, who was appointed by President Joe Biden, might turn out to be the fastest working federal judge we have seen in the era of Trump-inspired federal prosecutions. He was ready to set a trial date before Christmas, but adjusted to January 5th in order to accommodate the pretrial hearing schedule proposed by James Comey's lawyer. No schedule was proposed by the silent Lindsay Halligan or the 2 assistant U.S. attorneys who had to be imported from North Carolina to Virginia because no one in the federal prosecutor's office in the Eastern District of Virginia was willing to join Lindsay Halligan in this case, trying to prosecute James Comey. She was, like anyone who doesn't understand what's going on in a courtroom, apparently lost throughout the proceeding. The New York Times reports Ms. Halligan, a former insurance lawyer, did not speak in court. Instead, she spent the hearing rocking and nodding in her chair as a junior federal prosecutor brought in from North Carolina spoke for the Justice Department. And that junior federal prosecutor said, "We don't know what we're doing." He didn't speak those words, of course, but he said something that you can spend a lifetime in federal courts and never hear. When James Comey's lawyer said, quote, "We haven't received a single piece of paper of discovery to date," the junior federal prosecutor, Tyler Lemon, said, "We're just getting our hands around the discovery as well." What? How can you be standing there prosecuting James Comey and not know what your evidence is to prosecute James Comey? That's what the junior federal prosecutor told the judge today. We don't know what our prosecution evidence is. That's what he meant. The judge knew that. The judge's response to that was a judicial version of, "Are you kidding me?" The judge said, "All right, well, I will tell you, I'm a little skeptical of that. This does not appear to me to be an overly complicated case. There are 2 counts. It's a discrete set of facts." That's a polite way of saying this is the thinnest indictment that could possibly exist. And here it is, right here. It is 2 pieces of paper. And the only reason it's 2 pieces of paper is that on the first page, it accuses James Comey of making a false statement in a Senate hearing. And on the second page, it accuses him of obstruction of the Senate by making that same so-called false statement. So the one sentence James Comey spoke managed to get them 2 pages of an indictment. And James Comey said that on television in a Senate hearing. That's the entire case, that one sentence that he spoke on TV. And the junior federal prosecutor standing beside the silent Lindsay Halligan, rocking in her chair, tried to tell the judge that they are in possession of some massive amount of evidence, which includes inexplicably, according to them, classified information. And there's so much of it that this junior federal prosecutor who's been on this case for exactly one day, along with the other junior prosecutor from North Carolina who's been on the case for one day, because no real prosecutor in that office in Virginia will take the case, are, quote, just getting our hands around the discovery. The judge knows he's dealing with courtroom clowns. The judge knows that every federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia has refused to participate in this case. The judge knows all of the public information in this case. The judge knows that he's watching a legal Trump clown show in his courtroom. And although he dealt with it politely today, he also made it clear he has zero patience for Trumpian nonsense. The judge told the Trump prosecutors in front of him, I will not slow this case down because the government does not promptly turn everything over. And the government should have every interest in doing that. There should be no reason that this case gets off track because of the existence of some classified information. Either it's not relevant to the case, or it can be declassified, or we will go through the fastest CIPA process you have ever seen in your lives. Donald Trump's fever dream about today's proceeding was that he would, by ordering the prosecution of James Comey, force James Comey to suffer the humiliation of an arraignment in that federal courtroom today. But the only humiliation in that courtroom was on the Trump side of the courtroom today.
What we just witnessed shows Trump's misuse of power, clumsy, personal, and dangerously unprofessional, if not just dangerous. The entire Comey case revolves around Trump settling an old score. From the very start, this whole thing has been about vengeance, not justice. It's a political performance, and Trump plays every role, director, actor, and audience, all at once. The appointment of Lindsay Halligan kind of proves everything. A former insurance lawyer with 12 total days of experience as a prosecutor. 12. Trump placed her in that courtroom purely because she was loyal to him. She struggled with the most basic courtroom formalities, unable to even introduce herself properly, yet she's the one leading a case against a former FBI director. That is not confidence in her abilities or whether or not they can actually complete the case. That is just chaos and personal vengeance. And it shows. There was nothing backing this case up. No discovery material, no evidence, no clarity on charges, nothing. The prosecution team openly admitted that they're still getting their hands around the discovery, which in plain English means that they have no idea what they're doing. Even the judge saw through this, calling the case not even overly complicated, and that is a polite way of saying that this indictment is paper-thin nonsense. 2 pages, 2 counts, both coming from a single televised sentence that Comey said years ago. Think about that. Trump's DOJ went after Comey using evidence already reviewed, dismissed, and buried by multiple investigations, including those led by Trump's own appointees. None of them found a crime or anything worth prosecuting, but Trump pushed ahead anyway, forcing out legitimate prosecutors and replacing them with people willing to follow his commands, no matter how reckless the optics or how damaging it is. This case revolves around Trump abusing the legal system to target someone who stood up to him, plain and simple. It's a revenge indictment wrapped in legal language. And the irony? The courtroom humiliation that Trump wanted for Comey ended up landing on his own team. His chosen prosecutor stood silent, visibly out of her depth, representing nothing but Trump's personal agenda. What's unfolding here shows power being used as a weapon. It's a reminder that when leaders twist the justice system for personal gain, the entire foundation of accountability begins to collapse. And Trump, once again, is hitting directly at that foundation.